wonderful scholars, some of whom are good friends, some of whom are becoming friends, to the stage. It's my honor to welcome Pujya Bapuji here. It's my honor to welcome all of the esteemed scholars who have joined us over the last 3 days, the scholars who have come and reciters from India, and all of you in the audience. Thank you for joining us. I want to start by giving you some good news. Today is the last day that you'll be hearing from me, so you can be relaxed about other days going forward. We're reaching the first part of the evening programs, so we had 3 days of academic conversations where we've been hearing from some of the world's leading experts on the Ramayan from academies around the world. We have 3 great scholars joining us today and another great scholar from Harvard who will be the moderator. I want to say, of course, it's not the end of the evening programs. There are wonderful programs coming up. Tomorrow is a very special day. And then there are 3 days when we will be hearing from scholars and experts who have come from India to talk about the Ramayan and all the issues and tech and ideas around it. So please keep joining us for those. Because it's the last day that I'm up here, I want to say a special thank you to the Satya Prem Karuna team, Truth, Love and Compassion, for hosting us so graciously and generously here. They've done such an extraordinary job of making us and all of us feel very welcome and very much a part of their extended family. So especially Pavan, you and your team have made it all possible. Thank you very much. So that's really all I have to say. Let me introduce the scholars who are here very briefly. And did you want to do the, yeah. I think we're doing a little Sanman at first. So immediately to my left is Professor Robert Goldman. You will hear more about Robert Goldman, but he is the person who headed the translation of the Valmiki Ramayan. And many of us learn Sanskrit through his works. Next is Professor Ayelet Kotler. Ayelet has become a new friend. She's a scholar of the Persian traditions of the Ramayan in India, as well as other Persianate traditions. After that is Professor John Stratton Hawley, a very old friend. John Stratton Hawley is one of the world's greatest experts on Surdas. He has translated Surdas for the Harvard Classics series. And next to him is Francis Clooney, who will be our moderator today. So without much further ado, let me just give you a very brief introduction to Francis Clooney, or Frank Clooney as we call him very affectionately here. Frank Clooney is the Parkman Professor of Divinity and Professor of Comparative Theology here at Harvard University. One of the things he also studies is how comparative theology sheds light as you study other traditions within your own or in different traditions. He's been a very original thinker in that. He's a scholar of both Sanskrit and Tamil. He has, for example, he has a long range of works. I will only mention a couple of them. He has written extensively on Jaimini's Purva Mimamsa. He has written on Vedanta and comparative theology. He has a beautiful personal memoir, Hindu and Catholic, Priest and Scholar, a love story. And he's working on 2 very ambitious projects right now. He's translating the Alvars. For those of you who don't know, the Alvars are very important Vaishnava poets of South India. In Tamil Nadu, you could say that the tradition of folk bhakti might begin with them. So he's working on the alvars, and he's also working on some other material, but I don't want to take up too much time. Let me invite Francis Clooney to take over.
Namaste, namaskaram, vanakkam. Nice to be here with you tonight. I would like to begin by thanking Hitesh and Bhavesh for their wonderful work in arranging this event and arranging this to be done. So thank you all and to thank everyone who has come here during the day and here tonight, because it's so important to have a community. Now, Hitesh has already told you more than enough about me as a professor in the Divinity School. I can add, though, that my relationship with Ramayana is somewhat oblique, like a glance out of the side of my eye. I remember when I was after college in 1973, I was living in Kathmandu, teaching in a school, and I heard some bhajans being sung outside the gate of the school. And one of them began simply the familiar words, Raghupati Rama Sita Ram. And I had to begin to find out, well, who is Raghupati? Who is Ram? Who is Sita? And began to learn something about the devotion of Ram and Sita. When I read Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi's autobiography, I was taken with and even thrilled by his insistence early in the book about Ram Nama, and that your security in life, your safety in life, is to have the name Ram, 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 Ram. And that this was so important for that very active man in his life. And I found also that in my own work on the Sri Vaishnava tradition of South India, the Alvars, Acharyas like Ramanuja, Vedanta Deshika, and others, they too had great devotion to Rama, Sita, Lakshmana, Bharata, the other figures of the Rama story, saying we can learn better how to be humans, how to be devotees, by imitating them as best we can and trying as hard as we can to be like Hanuman, the great Bhakta. There's a scene in the Uttarakanda of the Ramayana that you all know very well, better than I, which is so important for the Vaishnavas, where Vibhishana comes from Lanka to Rama to surrender at his feet. And there are people who want to kill him. You can't trust him. He's the brother of Ravana. But Rama says in what's called in Vaishnavism, the Vibhishana Sharanagati, whoever comes to me, I will accept them, I will receive them, I will protect them. Now, all of that spirit of the love, the devotion, finding way through the traditions of Ramayana, which we're hearing about, is really my way of saying that I'd like to close my opening remark by turning to Sri Morari Bapu himself. And as someone who is not a Hindi speaker, observing you speaking and realizing the wonderful artful intelligence of your presentations, the intelligence, artfulness of your presentations, the way in which your words and your devotion, bringing out the best of everyone present, show us what it means to be an intellectual who believes and has faith. And to show that faith and the intellect go together, this has been a marvelous occasion. So thank you very much for that. I turn now with great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, and I'll introduce each speaker in turn. Robert Goldman, professor of the Graduate School, and Catherine and William Magistretti, Distinguished Professor of Sanskrit Emeritus at the University of California. He is best known for his work as the Director, General Editor, and Principal Translator of the fully annotated Princeton University Press translation of the critical edition of Valmiki Ramayana. perhaps the single most important influential work of the literatures of South Asia. This marvelous work that he and Sally Sutherland have done together, marvelous work that we're indebted to for, I'm sure, 100 years to come, is so important. I won't go any further because time is short, but to say that Bob has won so many awards, been distinguished in so many ways, is a real honor to have him here tonight. And his topic will be Divinity, Suffering, and Humanity, the Adi Kavi's biography of Lord Rama. So let us welcome our first speaker.
Thank you for that fulsome introduction. I would like to thank all the organizers of this wonderful, extraordinary event, especially Pavan Bhai, Bhavesh Bhai, Hitesh Bhai, Amrish Bhai, and all the other Bhais and Benjis. Don't forget the Benjis, who have put this marvelous performance and meet together. And especially, I want to extend my pranams to Parama Pujaniya Guruji, Morarji Bapuji, who has graced us during these meetings with the Karnamrita of his teachings and his wisdom. Karnamrita is a Sanskrit word for ear nectar. So this is like nectar to the ear. And if you will indulge me for one moment, I would like to pay my respects, my pranams to Sri Maruti Ji, whose image looms over this wonderful gathering of people. And that is because I had made a sankalp at the Sankat Mochan temple in Kashi before Lord Hanuman to enable us to complete this task of the translation. And so, Ulangya Sindho Salilam Salilam Yashokavahnim Janakat Najaya Adayateneva Tadahalankam Tam Pranjalir Anjaneyam Namami. For those of you whose Sanskrit may be slightly rusty, I pay my pranams to Lord Anjaneya Sami, who, having leapt over the ocean, took the fire of the grief of Janakatmaja, Sita, and used that to burn Lanka. Thank you so much. My talk today will talk about Valmiki's work towards Satyam, Prema, Karuna, truth, love, compassion. Shri Rama Rama Rameti, Rame Rame Mano Rame, Sahasranama Tatulyam, Rama Nama Paranane. The Ram Nama is equal to the Sahasranama, 1,000 names. So let me turn to my paper. In the beginning of Mahamud Jayasi's Kanhavat, a poem on the life of Krishna, the poet has the creator, Parameshwara, asked Vishnu to be born on earth to punish the evil king Kamsa for his cruelty in killing the sons of Vasudeva and Devaki. But Vishnu demurs, complaining that his previous incarnation, in which he lost his kingdom, had only one wife, who was stolen away, was filled with suffering. In response, Paramesa promises that this avatara, that is Krishna avatara, will be a much more pleasant experience. This perhaps satiric poem of Jayasiji highlights the difference between the great successive Vaishnava avatars, Rama and Krishna, and raises the question of the meaning and purpose of Valmiki's elaborate descriptions of the emotional and physical suffering of the hero of the Ramayana, which forms a central feature of some later literary texts, such as Bhavabhuti's great but lachrymose drama, the Uttara Rama Charita, which you see illustrated there, in which Rama says suffering was fixed in him. But later versions of the Rama Katha tend to play down or even deny the idea of the suffering of Rama. That is to say, the humanity of Rama, because everyone in those versions knows, as we know, that Rama is the supreme being. In Valmiki, even Rama does not know that. That's important. This evening, I would like to look a bit more closely at why Valmiki, almost uniquely among these Vaishnava authors of the Ramakatha, is so insistent on the humanity of Rama, to the point that he represents the avatara as unaware of his divinity and of his divine mission until it is accomplished. We should understand Rama's humanity as repeated by Valmiki in two senses of the term, both as a generic term distinguishing the hero, at least in his own self-conception as a man, and in his human compassion and adherence to the rules of his society and culture, in short, dharma. In this way, he is often invoked in stotras and hymns, etc. Ramam Lakshmana Purvajam Raghavadam Pitapatim Sundaram Vakutstam Karunamayam Gunanidhim Viprapriyantarmikam Rajendram Satyasandham Dasharatatanayam Shyamalam Shantamurtim Vande Lokabhiramam Raghukuletilakam Ravanam Ravanarim. Now, I've put this up there, this stotra, this Ramaraksha, and it has, color-coded, a number of types of terms. In the 27 terms in this hymn devoted to Rama, the outstanding ones are Karunamaya, Shantamurtim, Gunanidhim. Many of the others just are names, relations to other characters, genealogical names. Only one of those 27 epithets has to do with the martial side of Lord Rama. That is Ravanari. Because Rama, as we like to think of him, also is represented in shifting visual representations from a calmly posed, benign monarch, surrounded by his loving wife, Sita, and his inseparable younger brother, Lakshmana, and of course his most passionate devotee, Hanuman. Dakshine Lakshmano Danvi Vamato Janaki Shubha Purato Marutir Yasya Tamanamami Raghutamam Ramaya Ramabhadraya Ramachandraya Vedase Raghunathaya Nathaya Sitaya Pataye Namah. So this is how we see. But lately, representations of Rama tend to visualize him in isolation as a singular, muscular, armed warrior, defender of his devotees. This is, to my mind, at odds with the way Rama has been traditionally invoked by his worshippers, as exemplified by these often recited Rama Raksha posters. This is why I like to say Jai Siya Ram as opposed to Jai Shri Ram. The Ramayana, in its innumerable versions across the great array of regional, linguistic, geographical, and political cultures of Southern Asia, may be the most widespread and successful pedagogical text ever written. Valmiki's version, a poem, a history, and a shastra, a distinctively Vaishnava text, is the earliest extended account of the Leela of Lord Vishnu Narayana on earth as Rama. And yet Valmiki employs a brilliant device for making his hero uniquely among the Vaishnava avatars, unaware of his divinity. It is this particular feature of the poem and his actual divinity that accounts for the Ramcharita's adoption on the part of Jaina, Buddhist, and even Islamic cultures as a premier acculturative text, as well as in later Hindu versions of the Puranas and regional languages that tend to downplay or ignore the hero's humanity, while emphasizing his divinity. In keeping with this trend, the medieval and early modern authors of many Sanskrit language commentaries on Valmiki's monumental epic often struggle to rationalize or explain away Rama's humanity and attendant suffering. Jayasi's poem highlights a major difference in the characterization of the two most central Vaishnava avatars, Rama and Krishna. The most salient feature of differentiation between these towering figures serve as exemplars for their devotees. Rama is regarded as an exemplar and enforcer of dharmic conduct, but Krishna, a mischievous child, a romantic adolescent, the Puranic demon fighter, advisor to the heroes of the Mahabharata and the divine narrator of the Bhagavad Gita, serves as a focus of vicarious pleasure and spiritual devotion throughout his carefree acting out of his behavior and his revelations of his supreme Godhead. Thus, we often see the two avatars referred to respectively as Maryada Purushottama and Leela Purushottama, the manifestation of the Supreme Purusha, who observes and enforces ethical, social, and political boundaries, Maryada, and the Supreme Spirit who identifies divine play, Leela, even when it may be disruptive of social and ethical norms. There is no doubt that the audience of India's greatest ancient epics and Puranas experience great pleasure from the tales of Krishna's childhood miracles, his adolescent romances, and his awe at the revelation of his vibhutis and his Vishvarupa darshanam. But people who grow up in Indian culture and society are taught to emulate Rama, Ramadivat Nivartadvam, but worship Krishna. Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Govindam Bhaja Mudamate. And there are many differences, but that when we're told by their elders that not to read so much the Mahabharata, which it has some uncomfortable aspects, but we're told by their elders they should study Ramayana. There are many differences between the actions and careers of the two great avatars. Valmiki's poem spends barely a handful of shlokas on Rama's childhood, a popular theme in later versions, but he skips over the first 15 years of Rama's life almost without mention. While the great Krishna-centric texts like the Harivansha Mahapurana, the Srimad Bhagavatam, focus much of their energy on the Bala Krishna Leela. This brings me back to the issue of humanity, suffering, and self-knowledge on the part of the two figures. Krishna is always fully aware of his own divinity, from his very birth to his abandonment of human form. From his earliest infancy, he performs miracles and prodigious feats such as slaying demons, lifting mountains, reduplicating himself, inhaling wildfires, subduing nagas. And it is only his play that makes the simple gopas and gopis, among whom he spends his early years, seem to forget his astonishing powers each time he displays them. As he shows his mother when she accuses him of eating dirt in the playground, and he says, Naham bhakshitavanamba sarve mityabhishamsina yadi satyagerastarhi samaksham pashyame mukam. And when she looks in his mouth, what does she see? The whole universe, the stars, the heavens above, the earth, all the worlds of men, gods, and demons in this child's mouth. He is a master as a boy and a man. He never suffers any mental, emotional, or physical suffering, master of all situations in which he's involved. In contrast, Valmiki, virtually alone among the Hindu composers of the Ramacharita, largely adheres to the theme in which Rama, even as he performs a limited number of miraculous feats and demonstrations of superhuman strength, cannot under the conditions of the boon Brahma granted to Ravana, either know that he is actually the supreme divinity, nor be recognized as a god by those with whom he comes in contact. Famously, once he has accomplished his mission of the gods in killing Ravana, and the gods themselves descend from heaven to extol him with a grand stotra as the Purushottrama, the poet has him say to Lord Brahma, Atmanam manusham manye Ramam Dasharatatmajam Yoham yasya taraschaham Bhagavan stadbravitu me. I think of myself just as a man, Rama, son of Dasharatha. May the blessed Lord please tell me who I am and who I belong to and why I am here. The gods then utter another stotra. But Rama's lack of knowledge as a divinity is not really totally essential to the story, as we can see from the fact that the majority of later Hindu authors in the tale variously do not seem to take it terribly seriously. For example, we can compare Valmiki's account of the abduction of Sita, the Sitapaharana, with the version of the influential Adhyatma Ramayana, which was a great influence on Goswami Tulsiji. In this version, Rama informs Sitaji in advance of Rama's impending abduction and tells her to create a simulacrum of herself, a Maya Sita, Chaya Sita, and that for the Rakshasa to carry off, while she herself is to reside in the fire until the would-be abductor is slain. In this version, Sita's poignant suffering, so movingly rendered by Valmiki, is illusory, while his emotionally fraught account of her Agni Pariksha is replaced with a ruse, whereby the false Sita enters the fire, while the real one emerges from it unscathed. Then too, some of the other authors of the Adi Kavyas, many Sanskrit commentaries composed starting about the same time as the Adhyatma Ramayana, struggle with the passages in Valmiki that describe in great detail the emotional or physical suffering of the avatara, as he is grief-stricken over the separation from his beloved wife, her apparent murder at the hands of Indrajit, and the seeming death of his brother Lakshmana. Similarly, Rama is repeatedly so severely injured that he requires supernatural salvation in the person of Garudaji, or even emergency medical intervention from Hanumanji and Sushena, the monkey doctor. And Valmiki records these moments with physical suffering with very graphic accounts. His commentators employ their grammatical and interpretive skills to argue that Rama never really suffers, or that he's merely playing like an actor, his grief, bleeding, and pain. Some think, and I think that this is critical, argue that he does this as part of what we term the exemplary or even pastoral purpose of the poem. Let me explain. I'll give you one clear example. Commenting on a verse that depicts Rama and Lakshmana struck by Ravani's arrows, bleeding copiously from their wounds. The great 16th, 17th century Sri Vaishnava commentator Govindaraja says the following. Let me see if I can get this going. Yeah. Oops. That was the one where the gods came. I skipped that one. Here they are bound by Rav. And Govindaraja says, quote, "You may say that although Rama and Lakshmana do not really have blood, still, in conformity with the nature of humans, they manifest bleeding as might an actor. But if you persist in this foolish way, that they are merely imitating the human condition, what would be the purpose? Listen, Shrunu," he says, "if there were not to be a thorough conformity on Rama's part to the human condition, people would think he's not a human, he's a god. And therefore, it's impossible for us to practice dharma as he does. But if there is a full manifestation of human nature, the people seeing that this is the practice of outstanding men, Mahajana, they will practice dharma." And so it's also to show people that regarding Rama's condition of being bound by Indrajit's serpent noose, troubles sometimes befall all of us, even those who are devoted to the practice of dharma, but then they swiftly pass. But let me turn to the question of what one might call Rama's genetic humanity, to discuss his humanity as a moral and ethical quality. In this area, too, there's a stark difference between Krishna and Rama, and is perhaps best illustrated in their respective conduct in war. Readers of the Mahabharata will be aware that Krishna, as the Pandavas' advisor, is an exponent of a kind of unapologetic consequentialist ethics. Since the Pandavas are heavily outnumbered and face invincible warriors, Krishna, who will not fight in that battle, takes a consequentialist position, urging his advisors to kill their foes without regard for the niceties of Shastric warfare. And so all of the powerful warriors on the side of Duryodhana are killed through violations of the Shastric code, including Bhishma, Drona, Karna, and Duryodhana himself. Now, when compared with a civil war against one's kinsmen and revered gurus as confronts the Pandavas, one might imagine that in the Ramayana, where the enemy are the constitutionally evil, Brahmin-killing, cannibalistic Rakshasas, Nishacharas, there should be no hesitation on the part of a divine hero in wiping them out from the face of the earth, without regard for the niceties of conduct. But the poet makes a point of highlighting his hyper-ethical conduct. Here we see, although the audience knows the epic's outermost theological frame requires Rama as an avatara to destroy Ravana, the oppressor of gods, kings, and Brahmins, in Valmiki's version of the story, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyuttanam dharmasya tadatmanam svajamyaham paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Thank you for the accompaniment. But since Ravana is unwilling to return Sita, despite advice from his counselors and his enemies as well, it is in this context that Rama's adherence to Kshatriya code is made visible in his first duel with Ravana, about which nobody ever seems to think. Early in the war, Ravana had been battling 4 of Rama's allies. When they are all put out of action by Ravana, Rama intervenes. This presents an opportunity to kill the Rakshasa lord then and there and end the war, sparing many thousands of lives, ending the long torment of his abducted wife, and ridding the world of gods and men of this loka kantaka, this thorn in the side of the world, which is the fulfillment of Rama Avatara's purpose. But he declines to press an advantage. I quote Valmiki, perceiving that Ravana was fatigued, magnanimous Rama took up the blazing arrow and with it swiftly cut off his crown. Then Rama addressed the Rakshasa, with his crown severed, had lost his royal splendor and looked like a serpent robbed of its venom, or a darkened sun with its rays extinguished. You have performed great and fearsome deeds and struck down my heroic warriors. But since you are exhausted from that, I shall not bring you under the sway of death this day. Thus, Ravana, his pride and battle fury crushed, his bow cut to pieces, his horses and charioteers slain, his crown cut off, entered Lanka. And so Rama chooses to give up the chance of victory rather than violate the Kshatriya code of battle, according to which combatants must compete on equal terms. In another little noted passage, we find Rama and Lakshmana, along with all the Vanaras, nearly wiped out by the torrent of arrows of Indrajit Ravani. Why? They can't fight back because he's invisible. He's a sorcerer. He has made himself invisible. His chariot is invisible. So he's raining arrows out of the sky and they can't shoot back. This is a very desperate situation. And Lakshmana then intervenes. He said, I shall use the divine Brahma Astra to exterminate all the Rakshasas in a single blow. But Rama said, you must not slaughter the Rakshasas of the earth on account of a single one. A foe who does not resist, is in hiding, cups his hands in supplication, approaches seeking refuge, is fleeing or off guard. You must never slay these. Therefore, let us strive to fight on. The Yuddha Kanda presents one still further representation of Rama's ethical behavior toward his enemies. After Rama finally kills his foe, accomplishing the divine mission, Vibhishana, is ordered by him to perform Ravana's satkriya, his funeral rite, antyeshti. But Vibhishana refuses. The one time he defies Rama, and he says, with words that are filled with righteousness and political sense, dharmartha sahitam vachaha. I cannot perform the funeral rites for one who has abandoned righteousness and his vows, who was cruel, heartless, untruthful, and who assaulted the wives of others. Ever intent on ruining all creatures, he was my enemy in the form of a brother. So he should be respected because of the deference one owes to one's elders. Still, Ravana does not merit respect. In this world, people may say, I'm heartless, Rama, but once they hear about his qualities, they'll say I acted properly. But Rama insists, arguing that despite Ravana's unrighteousness and untruthfulness, adharmanrita sanyukta, he was a great, powerful, and splendid warrior. He then concludes with these interesting, remarkable words, Maranantani vairani nirvittam naha prayojanam Kriyatāmasya sanskaro mamapyesha tata tava mamapyesha tata tava. But all hostilities end with death. Our purpose has been accomplished. You must perform his funeral rites, for as he was to you, so he is to me. Mamapyesha yata tava. So as the commentators note, Rama holds Ravana in the same fraternal regard in which he holds Vibhishana. Compare this with Bhishma's treatment of his fallen foe, Duryodhana, in the Mahabharata. Having unethically killed him with an awful blow, he puts his foot on his head as an act of such lèse-majesté that Balarama arrives intent on killing him, forcing Krishna to intervene. This restraint is also very evident in the case of Sita. When Hanuman comes to Sita to tell her that she has been rescued by her Lord Rama, he asks her to please give him permission to kill all the horrible Rakshasa women who've been threatening to kill her, cut her into pieces, eat her, and so on. And Sita says this, who could be angry at servant women, mere functionaries and dependents of a king? They acted only on the orders of another. It's because of my evil destiny and past misdeeds that I have suffered this. One always experiences the fruit of one's actions. These Rakshasa women tormented me on the orders of Rama. Now they will not do so anymore. A superior person never requites evil on the part of evildoers. This rule of conduct must always be followed. This is Sita talking. Good conduct is the ornament of the virtuous. A noble person must act compassionately, whether people are wicked, virtuous, or even deserving of death, for no one is entirely innocent. One should not harm the Rakshasas. Compare that expression of compassionate ethical humanism with Draupadi's violent and vengeful attitude in the Mahabharata toward those who have injured her, such as Kichika, whom she urges Bhima to smash like a pottery vessel on a stone, vowing to kill herself should he fail to do so. And I'm coming to the conclusion here. And thus in the Yuddhakanda, the longest and most violent book of the great poem, we find the most dramatic formulations, ethical and compassionate treatment. As to the purpose of Rama's nescience with regard to his divinity, seems to be pastoral in portraying a divine hero as vulnerable to the same kinds of emotions as ordinary humans, the same kind of suffering. Valmiki has created a figure for whom people can not only worship, but also relate personally. In this, the pundits have often said that you can live up in the injunction, Ramadivat nivartatvam natueva Ravanadivat. You must behave like Rama, not like Ravana. Ramayana, with its innumerable later tellings, for millennia has been one of the greatest acculturative texts of all of Southern Asia and its many diasporas. For along with its literary influence as the first poem and its role as a central Vaishnava religious text, it is a treatise on dharma and morality that has served hundreds of millions of people as a guidebook on how to be a good and moral person. In this vein, let me close with a charming verse from Lila Shuka's Rama Katha as the classic bedtime story to tell young children. It represents the cowherd woman Yashoda trying to put her drowsy foster child Krishna to sleep as he yawns, falling asleep. And it goes like this. Ramo nama babuvahum tadabala site tihum kaupetuhu vacha panchavati vane viharatastam aharat ravanaha nidrartam janani katamiti harer humkarata shrunvataha saumitre kwa danur iti vyagragira pantuvaha. There was a king named Rama. His wife was called Sita. This is the baby falling asleep. Following his father's orders, they were living in the Panchavati forest where Ravana carried off his wife. Hari was listening to his mother's bedtime story, yawning drowsily, when he suddenly cried out, Saumitre, Lakshmana, my bow, where's my bow? Where's my bow? May these agitated cries of the Lord protect you all.
Thank you, Professor Goldman, for a wonderful, insightful paper, and also for singing and reciting for us as well. So thank you. Beautiful. Our second presenter tonight is Dr. Ayelet Kotler. She is a postdoctoral researcher at the Leiden Institute for Area Studies at the University of Leiden. Her work investigates how Hindu narratives and religious traditions were reshaped in the early modern multilingual and multicultural settings. Specifically, her scholarship focuses on how Persian became a medium for articulating Hindu devotion. She examines the ways in which the courts, the poets, and religious communities appropriated Persian in their retelling of Sanskrit text to speak to a range of political, literary, and religious concerns. Her work thus engages in questions related to devotional poetry, literary translation, multilingualism, religious encounters, cosmopolitan cultures, and vernacularization. She's working on a book that we're all looking forward to that I think builds in some ways on Professor Richman's work, Many Persian Ramayans. Is a study of the rich tradition of Persian retellings of the Sanskrit Ramayana in the period between the 16th to the 18th century. And her paper tonight for us will be Persian renditions of Ramayana. So let us welcome our next speaker, Dr. Kotler.
Good evening and namaste. I would like to begin by thanking the organizers for putting together such a fantastic event and inviting me to share with you all some of my work on Persian Ramayanas. I'm grateful to be here in the presence of Morari Bapu and deeply honored to share the stage with all these esteemed scholars whose work has deeply shaped the way I think about the story of Rama. Let me begin. Over the past several decades, scholars, many of whom are here with us today, have fundamentally transformed the way we think about the Ramayana. Rather than a single text, we now recognize a vast constellation of Ramayanas, each shaped by its own linguistic, literary, religious, and historical contexts. My talk this evening builds on this scholarship by examining one important branch of this tradition that has remained largely outside of the conversation, the Persian Ramayanas. With at least 20 known retellings composed between the 16th and the 19th centuries, Persian produced one of the richest Ramayana traditions in South Asia. During those centuries, Persian served as the principal language of governance and diplomacy, but also as a major language of literature and intellectual life across much of North India. A part of the vast literary production in Persian was the numerous translations and adaptations of Sanskrit texts. Beginning in the late 16th century, works such as the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, the Panchatantra, the Bhagavata Purana, and the Yoga Vasishta were rendered in Persian often more than once. Scholarship understandably tends to focus on the earliest of these translations, especially those produced under Mughal patronage, interpreting them as sites of encounter between Sanskrit and Persian, or between Hindu and Muslim intellectual and religious traditions. Read in this way, Sanskrit-Persian translations have frequently been understood as instruments of imperial self-fashioning, interreligious dialogue, and Muslim engagement with Hindu thought. While these perspectives have yielded important insights, they have also encouraged us to see Persian primarily as the language of Muslim courts and empires. This assumption, however, obscures two striking historical realities. First, the majority of Persian Ramayanas were composed not by Muslims, but by Hindus educated in Persian. Second, even those Persian Ramayanas originally written by Muslim authors were in subsequent generations copied, circulated, and read predominantly within Hindu literary communities. Why was the Ramayana retold so many times in Persian? In my talk this evening, I argue that Persian Ramayanas should be understood not merely as translations across religious boundaries or as products of Mughal cosmopolitanism, but as an integral part of the Ramayana tradition itself. Following the story of Rama into Persian reveals that Persian was not simply a language through which Hindus and Muslims encountered one another, but also a language in which Hindu authors expressed devotion and literary creativity. By placing Persian Ramayanas back within the broader history of the epic, we gain a fuller picture not only of Persian literary culture in South Asia, but also of the remarkable capacity of the Ramayana to find new voices, new audiences, and new literary forms. To illustrate this argument, I will briefly discuss Persian Ramayanas by four different authors, composed between the 17th and the 18th centuries. The examples I have selected reveal three distinct moments in the Persian life of the epic. The examples I have selected reveal, first, its appeal to the Mughal court and to poets writing within the tradition of the Persian court romance. Second, the experimental emergence of Persian as a language of Bhakti in the second half of the 17th century. And finally, the confident multilingual literary worlds of the 18th century, inhabited by Hindu authors for whom Persian had become an important medium of religious and literary expression. Taken together, these works show not only how the Ramayana was reimagined in Persian, but also how Persian itself became one of the languages through which the story of Rama could be told. We begin with Emperor Jahangir's reign in the 1620s. A poet named Girdhar Das dedicated a versified Persian Ramayana to the emperor, probably with the hope to win royal favor. By then, the Ramayana was already well known in elite Mughal circles after Akbar had commissioned a prose translation in the 1580s. Girdhar Das seems to have built on the appreciation the Mughal court had for the Ramayana and have recast the story of Rama as a long Persian narrative poem. Written in the tradition of the Persian epic, Girdhar Das's poem celebrates Rama as the ideal ruler, courageous, just, generous, and pious. The poem's prefatory chapters frame the story of Rama as directly relevant to Jahangir's reign, inviting readers to see Mughal Hindustan as a new Ayodhya, that is, an empire whose political and moral order mirrors the ideal kingdom established by Rama. While the poet follows the broad contours of Valmiki's narrative, he is highly selective in what he chooses to emphasize. Above all, Girdhar Das emphasizes brotherly devotion and Lakshmana's service to Rama. For example, when it becomes clear that Rama will have to leave Ayodhya for exile in the forest, Lakshmana pledges his allegiance to Rama in the following words, and I have a small excerpt for you here. I will go with you to the wilderness. I will exert myself there at your service. I will fetch you water in the desert. I will stand up at your command. I will make shelter for you in the cold and the heat. I will gather straw and leaves for softness. I will not leave you like your shadow, for you yourself say you won't survive without me. Equally revealing is what the poet downplays or leaves aside. Sita occupies a surprisingly modest place in the narrative and the ethical dilemmas that dominates Valmiki's Uttarakanda largely disappear. The poet introduces a new ending to the story, according to which Sita is not banished to the forest. When the couple returns to Ayodhya from Lanka, she seems to be there in the background, while Rama eventually decides to divide his kingdom between his brothers, his sons, and his nephews. At the end of the poem, after Lakshmana walks into the river to relinquish his earthly body, Sita ascends to heaven in a golden celestial carriage. Rama, the rest of his brothers, and his companions follow suit, and after walking into the river, one by one they get picked up by silver and golden carriages to the heavens. Now, given all we know about Rama and his reputation as an exemplary ruler worthy of veneration and emulation, and given the elite Mughal context in which this poem was composed, Girdhar Das's portrayal of Rama as the epitome of moral conduct should not surprise us. One might even imagine that this would become the dominant Persian image of Rama. Yet, at almost the exact same moment, another poet offered a radically different vision of Rama and his story. Sometimes in the 1620s, a poet named Saad Allah Masih composed another Persian Ramayana and dedicated it to Jahangir. In this Ramayana, known as Ramosita, Rama is not portrayed as the best among men, but rather as a deeply flawed ruler, whose story should serve as a cautionary tale for Persianate rulers. Unlike Girdhar Das, who reshaped the Ramayana in the idiom of the Persian epic, Masih recast it as a Persian court romance. His poem enters into dialogue not only with the Sanskrit epic tradition, but also with celebrated Persian poems, such as Gorgani's Visoramin and Nizami's Khosrow Shirin, using the story of Rama to explore questions of love, masculinity, honor, and moral responsibility. Rather than presenting Rama as an exemplary ruler, Masih transforms him into a cautionary figure whose failures as a husband ultimately undermine his kingship. At the heart of the poem lies the question of Rama's Javan Mardi, his courtly masculinity. How could a ruler striving to embody honor and righteous conduct end up destroying himself and everything he loved? Rama's downfall, according to Masih, begins with his excessive jealousy towards Sita. If jealousy is considered to be a defining aspect of masculinity in Persian Islamic normative ethics, excessive jealousy is deemed inappropriate and should be controlled. And so, throughout the poem, Rama struggles to reconcile competing ideals of masculine honor. He wishes to uphold his reputation, fulfill his royal obligations, and remain a worthy husband. Yet these very ideals become impossible to reconcile. His jealousy gradually grows, transforming virtues into destructive vices. Masih pushes this argument to a remarkable conclusion. Reflecting on Rama's treatment of Sita, the poet declares, "Love was replaced by evil deeds. Ram outdid Ravan towards Sita." Masih thus argues that Rama's actions, his suspicion, the banishment of Sita, and his inability to overcome his maddening jealousy ultimately caused greater harm than Ravana's deeds. Rama's actions thus proved to be not only destructive for his relationship with Sita, but also for his courtly masculinity. After banishing Sita, Rama realizes he has destroyed not only his marriage, but also his identity as an ideal lover. When he finally finds Sita, he begs for her forgiveness, but she will not forgive him. Rama blames his jealousy for everything that has happened, and so he says, "Please, oh please, have mercy on me, the heartbroken one. Please forgive my sin of jealousy. Don't torture my soul so much. Separation from you has been a well-deserved punishment. You should know, dear Moonsliver, that men are helpless in the face of jealousy. I have offended you greatly with this great sin, but my jealousy took control of me." In this passage, Rama confesses to what seems to him as impossible, that his jealousy, the very thing that defines his masculinity, forced him to destroy the ideal position as a lover he is supposed to embody. Sita is unmoved, and right before she is swallowed by the earth, she delivers the poem's final judgment on Rama. "Spare me the hypocrisy of your affection," she says, "for I am swallowed whole because of jealousy." With his courtly masculinity shattered and his wife gone, Rama can no longer strive to fix what he had broken. Rama ultimately renounces his kingdom and withdraws from the world. Quite remarkably, this poem was probably the most popular Persian Ramayana over the centuries. Dozens of manuscripts survive today, alongside at least 2 editions printed in the late 19th century in hundreds of copies. Readers clearly appreciated the poem's elegant language and literary sophistication. Yet Masih's critical portrayal of Rama remained exceptional within the Persian Ramayana tradition. Later authors would once again imagine Rama very differently, as Persian increasingly became a language not simply of courtly ethics, but of Bhakti. Although the first works of Persian Bhakti literature appeared only around the 1680s, the conditions that made them possible were created nearly a century earlier, when Emperor Akbar declared Persian the official language of Mughal administration. As knowledge of Persian became essential for imperial service, growing numbers of Hindus sought education in Persian. By the 17th and the 18th centuries, these Persian-educated Hindus had become among the most prolific authors writing in Persian. They composed histories, poetry, dictionaries, travelogues, and literary anthologies. Their education, however, involved far more than linguistic training. It meant immersion in the cosmopolitan Persianate world, with its literary aesthetics, classical imagery, cultural references, and ethical ideals. Persian gradually ceased to be merely the language of imperial employment and became a conscious aesthetic choice, a language in which Hindu authors chose to imagine their own religious and literary worlds. And so, beginning in the 1680s, Hindus increasingly used Persian for a new purpose, expressing their devotion to Rama and Krishna. This development posed new literary challenges and questions. How to praise Rama in a language that had not been used before to do such a thing? What should devotion to Rama sound like in Persian? Hindu authors writing in Persian in the late 17th century had to experiment and find new ways to use existing literary devices in their attempt to praise Rama from a devotional standpoint. This literary quest is best exemplified by the work of Chandraman Bidel, who retold the story of Rama in Persian not once, but twice. Each retelling experiments with different genres, narrative structures, forms, and poetic conventions to find how Persian could be reshaped into a language of Ram Bhakti. The introduction of his first Ramayana from 1686 sheds light on what motivated this project. Dedicating his book to Rama as the manifestation of divine love, Bidel explains that during those years, a desire had arisen to hear the story of Sri Ramjiv Bhagavan, yet the Brahmins who traditionally recited it were unable to satisfy that desire. This remark suggests, first, that Bidel imagined a new Persian-reading Hindu audience, one that wished to engage with the story of Rama, but perhaps could not access it easily in Sanskrit. And secondly, it suggests that even though Persian Ramayanas were already in circulation, a new one was needed. Not simply another account of Rama's deeds, but a retelling of the story of Sri Ramjiv Bhagavan, the divine, beloved Rama, the supreme being. His first prose Ramayana, however, failed to satisfy him. Despite its implicitly devotional preface, the narrative itself remains surprisingly restrained with little reflection on Rama's divinity. Years later, Bidel himself admitted that this experiment had not achieved what he had hoped. Only 7 years later, in 1693, he composed the story again, this time in verse. In the poem's opening chapters, he openly writes that he was unhappy with how the first attempt turned out. And he explains why he decided to begin anew. And so he tells us, "Even though I wrote this story in prose once before, I want to versify it now, to distinguish myself through this pure tale. I sing like a nightingale with Ram's love. I bring the heart buds into full bloom." These verses reveal a striking shift in purpose. The act of versifying the Ramayana is not simply an attempt at stylistic elevation, but an act of devotion. Bidel then goes on to explain that only by surrendering himself completely to Rama could he become the poet he wished to be. Poetry thus becomes a devotional practice, and literary creativity is presented as the fruit of Bhakti. The challenge Bidel faced was not so much theological as it was literary. With no established literary models for Persian Vaishnava devotional narrative poetry, Bidel experimented freely with the resources of Persian literature. He even adopted different poetic meters in different sections of the poem, an extremely unusual choice in classical Persian poetry. In his poem, Bidel was thus testing the limits of Persian to discover how it might accommodate a new devotional voice. The poet also drew selectively on contemporary North Indian Ram Bhakti traditions, incorporating episodes familiar from the Ramcharitmanas by Tulsidas. But perhaps the clearest expression of Bidel's efforts to speak in a devotional voice lies in the poem's meta-narrative verses. Throughout his poem, Bidel frames every episode with a classical Persian plea to the cupbearer, asking him for inspiration and sustenance to help him celebrate Rama. And so he writes in one place, "Come, cupbearer, into the solitude of my heart. Let your face illuminate the assembly. Fill my cup to the brim with that golden drink, for I sing the song of my beloved king." And the beloved king is, of course, Rama, who emerges in these meta-narrative verses not as the hero of an ancient epic, but as God, liberating all beings from suffering. He perfumes the fountain of the world's garden. He grants liberation to all the people of this time. For the world, remembering him is a spring cloud. For the young seedling-like mystics, he is a great river. Immerse yourself in remembering Ram today. Rise up from the snare of the soul-burning carnal desires. By inserting such meta-narrative verses into his poem that praise Rama's grace and divine love, in contrast with his heroic persona that emerges from the narrative itself, Bidel reminds his readers of Rama's divine essence and reframes the narrative as a devotional story. Bidel's two Ramayanas, therefore, document something much larger than the evolution of a single poet. They allow us to watch the emergence of a new Persian devotional idiom. His work captures a moment when Hindu-Persian poets had not yet found a confident devotional voice and were actively experimenting with Persian to make it their own. By the 18th century, the literary landscape of North India had changed dramatically. What had been tentative experiments in the late 17th century had developed into a flourishing tradition of Persian Vaishnava literature. Persian works celebrating Rama and Krishna, translations of the Bhagavata Purana, poems on Mathura and Vrindavan, and manuscripts of earlier Sanskrit Persian translations, all circulated widely among North Indian Vaishnava communities. Persian had become not simply a language of empire, but also a language of Hindu literary and devotional life. Among the poets who emerged from this milieu, Amanat Rai stands out. A Vaishnava scribe trained in Persian, Amanat composed Persian renditions of the Ramayana, the Bhagavata Purana, and the Bhaktamal, the three great pillars of early modern North Indian Vaishnava literary culture. Unlike Chandraman Bidel, who experimented with Persian to carve out a devotional space in it for the story of Rama, Amanat inherited a literary tradition that had already begun to take shape. His Persian is polished, confident, and fully at home within both the Persian and Vaishnava worlds. This confidence is visible even before the story begins. Classical Persian masnavis, or narrative poetry, traditionally opens with a series of prefatory chapters praising God, the Prophet Muhammad, patrons, and the poet's own inspiration. Rather than omitting these conventions, as many of the earlier Persian Ramayana composers had done, Amanat appropriates them completely. The praise of God, for example, becomes a Vaishnava account of creation centered on the cosmic form of Vishnu Narayan. The chapter on poetic inspiration celebrates Sarasvati, and the customary praise of the prophet is transformed into a theological meditation on the flow of divine presence in history and reflection on Rama's divine essence. These are far more than substitutions of Hindu names for Islamic ones. Amanat translates the Masnavi's literary conventions themselves into a distinctly Vaishnava idiom. The very framework through which Persian readers had long approached Persian poetry is reshaped to articulate Vaishnava theology, cosmology, and devotion. By the time the narrative begins, the reader has already entered an unmistakably Hindu literary universe. Amanat Rai thus concludes the prefatory chapters with a personal prayer, dedicating the poem to Rama. And so he writes, "His grace has been guiding me. My mouth opens to praise him. I wrote this holy book in his praise. It overflows with light like the sun. Where would my tongue be if it weren't for him? Where would my desire for this story be? Through his grace, I have this steadfast hope that this poem becomes famous. I don't praise anyone but him. My soul is nourished by him. His grace is a reason to live. He frees one from pain in the moment of death." Amanat's Ramayana, therefore, represents something fundamentally new. It demonstrates that Persian had become fully and confidently one of the languages through which Hindu authors express their devotion. While Amanat's preface carries out most of the devotional labor, much work was put into the body of the translation as well, to shape Rama's story in a way that would intensify emotions and speak to devotional sentiments. Amanat, like other Hindu poets at the time, who chose to use Persian to express Bhakti, did so not out of necessity. Their aesthetic and poetic taste has changed with their integration into the Persianate cosmopolitan world, and they wanted to experiment with everything the tradition had to offer, not necessarily to win cosmopolitan literary fame, but to bring the Persian language and literary tradition closer to them, to domesticate it, to stretch it, to make it fit for expressions of Bhakti. If a century earlier, Hindu authors translated the story of Rama into Persian, by the 18th century, they were translating Persian literary culture into a Vaishnava idiom. Persian had thus become a language in which Hindu authors confidently imagined, interpreted, and celebrated their own religious worlds. Let me conclude by returning to the question with which we began. Why was the Ramayana translated into Persian so many times? It was not because earlier translations were inadequate, nor was it because Persian readers lacked access to the story. The examples I shared with you today show that every poet sought a different Rama and found new possibilities within Persian to express him. Each new Persian Ramayana reshaped the epic and drew on diverse literary traditions to meet the aesthetic, theological, and social concerns of its own moment. Persian Ramayanas, it's not working. Never mind. Persian Ramayanas are only one part of a much larger archive of Persianate Hindu writing that remains insufficiently studied. Continuing to treat Persian primarily as the language of Muslim courts and empires obscures the historical realities of early modern North India, where Persian served as a shared cultural resource across religious communities. Bringing Persian more fully into the study of Hindu traditions and Hindu authors into the study of Persian literary culture allows us to move beyond anachronistic assumptions that align language, religion, and community too neatly. Attending to these multilingual literary worlds allows us to better understand early modern North India, not as a landscape of neatly separated linguistic or religious spheres, but as one characterized by sustained interaction, literary experimentation, and cultural overlap. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kotler. We look very much forward to your book coming out, so please hurry up and finish so we can read your book. Thank you. So our third speaker tonight is no stranger to Harvard University. Professor John Jack Hawley finished his PhD at Harvard in 1977, so almost 50 years ago, and has been a visitor at Harvard so many times over the years and is welcome back. His research is focused on religious life of North India, on the literature that has been generated in the course of the last 500 years. He is the author or editor of some 25 books. Most concern Hinduism and religions of India, Others are broadly comparative. Recent publications include A Storm of Songs, India and the Idea of the Bhakti Movement, and with Kenneth E. Bryant, Sur's Ocean, Poems from the Early Tradition. Both came out in 2015. He has served as director of Columbia University's South Asia Institute and has received innumerable awards from innumerable distinguished fellowships and so forth. And he will speak to us tonight on Sur's Ramayana. So please, Jack, welcome.
Thank you very much, Frank. It's the greatest pleasure and somewhat frightening to be here with you. I've been in Sanders Theater many times, but never in this context. So ये मुझको बड़े आश्चर्य की बात है कि मैं यहाँ गया हूँ आपके साथ कार्य से। बड़े आदर है मेरे लिए और आप सब लोगों का दर्शन करना मैं कह नहीं सकता वो कितना अरे हरे तो बदल गया है ऐसे देख करके। तो सत्संग आज ही कल ही ये दोनों दिन मैं यहाँ प्रस्तुत आया हूँ। आज ही हमने सीखा कि सत्संग का क्या मतलब क्या हो सकता है। वो तो केवल बहुत से लोग साथ साथ बैठने की बात तो नहीं है, पर कुछ न कुछ तो हो रहा है उस संदर्भ में, विशेषकर आपकी कृपा से गुरुजी। ये मैंने सबसे पहले देखा। भागवत कथा मैंने कई बार सुना, कई बार पर यह पहली बार है कि मैंने रामायण का कथा सुना। और रामलीला तो होती रहती है वृंदावन में, पर रामायण की कथा कम से कम मैं कभी नहीं सुना। तो ये एक आश्चर्य की बात है, आज ही का आश्चर्य की बात है मेरे लिए। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। और कि हम हद सत्संग के बारे में कभी शायद जाने में देख लो क्या हो रहा है हार्वर्ड यूनिवर्सिटी में। ये नए विद्यार्थी जो हैं, स्टूडेंट्स जो हैं, वो आते ही रहते हैं परिवार के साथ और क्या करते हैं, वो भी सत्संग करते हैं। ये पहली बार है शायद कि एक दूसरे का परिचय करता है, तो वो शेक हैंड्स करेगा या कुछ न कुछ करेगा। वो ऐसे कहेगा कि मेरा ईमेल वो है, या तो मुझको टेक्स्ट करना, या तो न जाने क्या कहते हैं, पर मैंने कुछ न कुछ सुना। ये भी सत्संग है, नया सत्संग जो इस विश्वविद्यालय में आज ही चल रहा है। और शायद नहीं कहना चाहिए इस बात, पर ये जानते हैं कि हार्वर्ड यूनिवर्सिटी हमारे राष्ट्रपति को बड़ी बुरी बात है। क्यों बुरी बात है हार्वर्ड यूनिवर्सिटी? क्योंकि वो यहाँ पर विद्या की कोशिश कर रहे हैं। तो ये खतरनाक है उस दुनिया में, उन दुनिया में जो मैं देखता हूँ कि एक दूसरे का परिचय करता है। आज ही तो नहीं क्या सोचना चाहिए। बड़ी उम्मीद की बात है कि हमारी दुनिया जो है वो रहेगा और बैर तो हो जाएगा, और कह नहीं सकता। 2 और साल तो हैं जब तक रावण उस द्वीप में बैठा है। 2 ही साल हैं, तो पूरी आशा है कि उन 2 साल के बाद कुछ और हो सकता है। और आप लोगों से एक बात करना चाहता हूँ। Scholarship, the word scholarship creates a terrible sense of either fear or boredom in the minds of many people. But to stand after Bob Goldman, you know who the Adi Kavi is, but it's also the Adi Kavi. And then to hear what we have heard from Ayel about the Persian Ramayanas, I'm telling you, today we saw the march of scholarship. we've spoken about your book to come, but in what you said, it's possible to see how Saraswati ke bandhar ke diwar jo hai, they're being pushed. They're not this. It's not the same bandhar anymore if you move into the Persian literature as you have done. So I just say it's a bit of a frightening thing to be standing in that position. And I've used a lot of my time to say so. But in a way, it's the most important thing, I think, to say. To have a feeling that scholarship can really contribute to the spiritual life, the life of truth of many people. That is a wonderful thing to be able to affirm. And I think, having heard the two of you today, it is clear that that can actually happen. So thank you. Frank, I don't really know how much time I've now used up. Okay, so we'll see how far we get, but in any case, I'll try. This is now English, the language of the Raj. Okay. One of the great fortunes of my life is that I have often had the chance to correspond with Rupert Snell. Oh, there he is. With Rupert Snell. And as you probably noticed yesterday, or certainly in some of his writing, Rupert Snell has a very fine sense of humor. It rose to the surface in a recent email exchange. He was talking about how much he loves Tulsidas, and I felt I had to stick up for the gentleman who stole away my own life. And so let me repeat before you a famous doha, Sur Sur Tulsi Shashi, Udagana Keshavadas. Abake Kabi Kadyot Sama, It Uta Karprapakas. Quite to the contrary of what I just said in regard to your wonderful speech. Sur is the sun, Tulsi the moon, Keshavdas the stars. Today's poets are little more than fireflies flickering here and there. Rupert, being Rupert, had a response. He wrote, quite apart from its metrical error, the first quarter being one matra short, the meaning is upside down in my view. While Sur is a master of moonlit romance, Tulsi's blazing sun illuminates every nook and cranny of the worldly and otherworldly life. Both problems, Rupert said, could be solved as below. And with the added irony of a mismatch with the names. So here is Rupert Snell. Tulsi Sur, Ra Sur Shashi. So Tulsi is the sun, and Sur is the moon, and the others stay where they are. Fair enough. But let's put the matter of relative brilliance aside and concede that there are major differences between these two bright lights. In so many of his pads, Surdas wants to put us in the heart of the moment, sometimes with a surprise when the pad comes to an end. Tulsidas does something like this too, of course, especially in the Vinaya Patrika. But in the Manas, it's always the consciousness of how the individual episodes belong to a story far greater than the moment. Chopais and dohas succeed one another in a way that's different from Sur's piercing individual pads. And of course, there's the Ishtadevata issue. Sur belongs primarily to Krishna, while Tulsi is devoted to Ram. But do you know that in the wide expanse of Sur's ocean, there is a Ramayana hidden away? That's the secret I would like to share with you today, in case you don't know this already. Sur's Ramayana, so to speak, is nothing like an epic. It's 15 individual poems that occur in no particular order among the 250 so buds that we can confidently date to the 16th century, his own. This is where scholarship comes in again, folks. How do we find out? So the Sur's ocean is actually a huge river that has grown over time. And what that means is that many of the poems we read thinking it's Surdas were not actually composed by the historical Sur. But by using manuscripts, by finding manuscripts, dated manuscripts, and comparing them to one another, we can discover something about the Sur who lived in the 16th century. So, how is that? We know that Tulsi began composing the Ramcharitmanas in 1574. The oldest Sur manuscript is only 1582, so that's older, but it's built on 3 earlier manuscripts that let us know very clearly that the oldest Sur materials go back to before when Tulsi began to write the Manas. So I think we can say that Sur is the elder brother here and Tulsi the younger. Now, those of you who are younger brothers know that the younger brothers can be very brilliant, but Sur is probably a little older in any case. And that's what the dated manuscripts allow you to do. I'm very grateful that when Ken Bryant and I worked on this problem, this set of problems, the resulting volume was published here at Harvard, actually, in 2015, I guess. It was really Ken who was responsible for the critical editing that becomes the basis for that volume, and I tried the translations. So here's the thing. In those approximately 300 poems, some 15 come out in such a way that you can tell these are Ram poems. So what are the Ram poems that are in Sur's ocean? By the time we get to the year 1640, which is the first time we have Sur's poetry described as an ocean, Sur Sagar, 1640, by then we already have 42 Ram poems, to the extent that they are described as having, by the editor, as being Raghunath Charitra. But they're not a Charitra in the same sense that they would be if it were the Manus writing. No, they're individual poems that fit together in a way that you have to decide as you make your discovery with what each poem is about. Tonight, I doubt that I'll have the chance to share 3 with you, as I had hoped. Time is too short, but let me at least try 2. So I may be a little more brief, but let's give them a try. I want to there's another part to this story. There's been a marvelous exhibition that I hope you've seen because it's just closed at the Smithsonian, at the Cincinnati Art Museum, and at the Cleveland Art Museum of the so-called Shangri Ramayana. Absolutely wonderful and gorgeous, put together by Sonia Ree and her colleagues, Sonia Ree Mace and her colleagues. And you see, I just hit it by mistake. You saw the cover there. It's not going to go back. Never mind. So let me just mention that and say that it's a marvelous, marvelous resource. So I want to start with a poem that bears the voice of Ram. We find him in the forest, the great wilderness of life, and Sita has been taken from him. We're somewhere in the Aranyakand. How does this affect Ram's sight, his hearing, his smell, and touch? It's all right there in the poem I want to share with you, but first let me show you how it's envisioned in this Ramayana, and you can see for yourself that here the older brother and the younger brother are finding their way in the forest, and they're affected by all that is around them. Here's another vision. Note, please, the tiger. It also could be a lion from the poem that is about to be heard. In any case, that's also relevant to what we're going to be here. So what do they see? This, at least, is what Rama sees and hears. Ajuhu anujanija bana itnanu mili hai janaki hari kachuk batani ki sahnani meri drishti pari Katikehari, Banisu Kokula, Sasi Mukaprabhadari, Mrigananapai, Nainanihi Sobha, Jatin Gupta Kari, Champakavarana, Charanakara Kamalani, Dario Dasana Kari, Gati Marala, Bandhuka Adhata Chabi, Ahi Anupa Kabari, Ati Karuna, Raghunath Jasai, Jugabara, Jata Gari, Surdas Prabhu, Priya Prema Basa, Nijamahima Bisari. And by the way, I won't go into the translation, but he gives us another poem in which he does describe the glories of the physical presence of Ram. So perhaps he's remembering that other poem as he describes what Sita can no longer see here. The lesson is clear. In Sita's absence, what can he see? He can only see Sita. And now let's take a look at how things seem from Sita's side. Okay. Is that, hello, Surdasi. Oh yes, I wanted to say something further. This is quite important actually. This poem, the last poem we just heard, is actually is included in the oldest manuscript. But this one is not. It does appear in 8 of the 15 of the old dated manuscripts that we have. So let's call it an authentic poem. How can it not be? But it doesn't happen to be in the oldest. What is the oldest attestation? You will be happy to know, Ayala, that is in the 1620s, 1624, and not just a date, 1624, and it was written for the king of Bikaner, where? In Burhanpur. And what was he doing in Burhanpur? He was a part of the Mughal army of Jahangir. So let's remember, so once again, Muslims and Hindus and people who are Hindu-Muslim, Jahangir himself, are on the scene as this poem is being transcribed. I just might let me say also that thinking of Tulsidas, when he wrote the Manas, what was he doing? He was transforming into a new form the Premakyan genre, which had been explored by Muslim poets in a prior generation. So Jahangir and Persian and the cosmopolitan environment of North India, I think, is very much in the background as we encounter the poems of Sur and also, of course, the poem of Tulsidas, the great poem. Now the poem itself. Yes, the scene you will recognize. We're in the Ashoka Vatika. We're in the Ashoka Vatika, and take in the scene. You see those ladies over on the right, the Rakshasis. They've fallen fast asleep. And you see that little gentleman who is in the tree, that tiny, tiny person. Who is that? Hanuman. That's right. And this is going to be a poem in which Sita recognizes that Hanuman is on the scene and tries to find something to say to him. Dekhe yah gati. Oh, you know that. Dekhe. In the old manuscripts for Bhadrasha, in any case, ka is written sha. So it's a darshan poem. Dekhe. Dekhe yeh gati jat sandeso kaha hon kahon. Suni khape. In pranani ko pahra kab lag det rahon. Ati chapal chilyoy chahat. Khartan kachu bichar, lai naam jathan karida kati roki muk dwar. Itni baat janavati tum so darpati ho, Hanavant. Na hin sur, suno kahu ko dukha, karunamaya kant. You can see my translation on the right. And you can see that I've made a terrible mistake. In verse 4, I have said the following: I only restrain them, my breaths, calling his name Ram Ram, and thereby closing the door of my mouth. So you've understood that in the original. But I felt that for the sake of readers who might not be Ramayanis in the sense that you are, I had to give the name of Ram on the page, or they wouldn't understand. But it's a dosh. It's a terrible dosh. Dekhi mera dosh. But I found no way around it. They had to know what it was about saying the name that kept her alive. And there's another problem. There always is with translation. If we get down to verse 5, there may be a second meaning. Maybe she's worried about waking up those Rakshasis. So maybe we should translate, I fear to trouble you, rather than focusing that line on the syllable itself. In any case, that is the pathos of translation. You lose things all the time, and with luck, you're able to touch onto something that will bring that experience alive in a new guise for someone else. In any case, that second to last verse gives us a glimpse of Sita's noble restraint before the dam bursts in the final line. In the final line, she owns up to how great her suffering is, her dukkha, and look at that poignant last word. With Surdas, you always have to watch for that last word. It has to rhyme with the name of Hanavant, that's to say Hanavant, and appropriately, we've been focusing on Ram through the whole poem. Now we're going to be seeing a much shorter word, Kant. And what does Kant convey? Well, it's a husband, but it's also a dear lover. It's very hard to find the boundary between these two. So what it's giving us as a last word, her perspective, which of course has to do with the fact that he's married to this person, but she's not just married to him, he is her Kant. And that's the rhyming word that he saves for that last moment. After we've recited the poem together, or sung it together even better, that's the sound that stays in our mind. So, Sura, Tulasi, Shashi, I wouldn't want to have to decide between the two, but I think there's a case to be made for both of them. Am I out of time? Oh, do I? But Aastha ki baat to hai, dekho. Did you add those in surreptitiously? That's remarkable. Dekho, wo jhoot bolta tha. Well, then let me tell you one more thing. We heard from Bapuji this morning, we had an evocation of a certain poem which has to do with Surdas. Purosa dhrida ina charanana kero Sri Valava nakachandra jatabina Sabasagamanja andhero, and it ends with a marvelous line about Sura kaha kahad vidhi antara. So, very famous poem in which he doesn't actually say that he is blind, but the sense of being andro is very much hanging over the poem. Now I'm going to tell you a very sad thing. Are you ready? Are you sitting down? I'm going to tell you a very sad thing, and it is a scholarly thing. This is the danger of being in Saraswati's Bandar. That poem, which is famous, so famous that it was brought to light by Guruji himself this morning, that poem is not included in the old poems of the 16th century Surdas. It only appears in the Vallabh Sampradaya, in the Chaurasi Vaishnavan ki Varta, the Surdas ki Varta. Now, we should have a manuscript of that text that dates back to 1640. It's in Kankaroli, but it has never been allowed to be photographed. So this means that most scholars, myself included, have not been able to conclude whether that date can be trusted or not. That's And this relates to Philip, to what you were saying about the miracle of the Ramayana. Finally, we can see it, everyone. So this is a problem. It's not that it may be a 16th century poem in that narrow tradition, in the Vallabhite tradition, but not for the general readers of Surdas. This is a sectarian affirmation. So now let me show you the one poem in the entire 15, body of 15 that are to Ram in the old Sursagar, the one poem, Kahiyat Ram, Tyagi Dani. Okay, one manuscript says Hari instead of Ram, and another one says Ase, but on the whole they say Ram. And the one at Burhanpur also says Ram. Okay, so Kahiyat Ram Tyagi Dani, Chari Padarth Diye Sudamahi, Ruguru ko Sut Ani, Vibhishana ko Lankadini, Apurva li pachani, Ravana ko tasamastaka chede. That doesn't sound so good, does it? But let's remember, it's in the course of Ravan's losing all of those heads that he has the touch of Sri Ram. So that's also his salvation. Ravana ko tasamastaka chede, karigari sarang pani, Prahlad ki pratigya purai. You remember the pratigya that the Lord is to be found everywhere, even in stone. Prahlad ki pratikya purai. Surpati kinho jani. Surpati is Indra. Surpat, doesn't that sound kind of like Sur? Sure enough, it's a kind of silent anticipation of the poet's name. He's been building a list through this poem. Do you see how the beginning of every verse is someone? Someone who is on the list of the saved. And there are even some in the half lines that follow. Sandipani, and then Indra himself. So we get to the end of that list and we know what the conclusion is going to be. At last, the poet has to give his own name in that very spot. Surely he is going to be saved. There will be some wonderful testament to the marvels that have been showered upon Surdas. And what does he write? Surdas ko kahniturai nainani huki hani. Nainani huki hani. This is the one place, to my knowledge, in the dated manuscripts where we have Surdas speaking as perhaps someone who had cataracts in old age, or some terrible thing happened to him, and he, the great observer of his world, seeing Krishna and Rama everywhere, can no longer see. Surdas ko kahniturai nainani huki hani. And whom does he address that complaint to? He addresses it to Ram. So Sur Ramayana. Sur Tulsi Shashi. That's what I learned. Or is it the Snell version? Tulsi Sur Shashi. I'm happy with either version. I'm happy with either Krishna or Ram, and I'm happy for both of them. And I have a feeling that Surdas was also. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack, for an entertaining and learned discussion. We are finished our academic presentations. I believe now we have a musical piece. And so we will now shift gears one more time, but thank you very much.
भारत से पधारे जो कथा गायक हैं, रामायण के विद्वान जो पधारे हैं, उनमें से एक गुमास्ता देवी आए हैं। वो अपना एक पुस्तक प्रोफेसर डायना एक को, प्रोफेसर रूपर्ट स्नेल को और प्रोफेसर मडोका फुकुओका को अर्पण करना चाहते हैं। यदि सब है तो यहाँ पे आ जाइए।
हमारी ये परंपरा रही है कि जब भी कोई धार्मिक, सामाजिक प्रसंग होते हैं, वैचारिक उपक्रम का आयोजन होता है, तो प्रायः प्रारंभ में या फिर आखिर में सुर से समापन होता है, मतलब संगीत से समापन होता है। कई प्रसंगों में नृत्य भी शामिल होता है। इस परंपरा को ख्याल में रखते हुए ये आयोजन में इस बात का ख्याल रखा गया है कि प्रारंभ में या अंत में समापन संगीत से हो। तो आज हमारे बीच उपस्थित है आदरणीय श्री देवाशीष डे, एक उत्तम गायक है। बनारस घराने की मूर्धन्य गायक पंडित पशुपतिनाथ मिश्र और पंडित मुकुंद विष्णु कालविंद के आप तेजस्वी शिष्य हैं। आप एक लब्ध प्रतिष्ठ शास्त्रीय गायक एवं वाग्गेयकार हैं। आपने अपनी 3 प्रकाशित पुस्तकों के माध्यम से 500 से अधिक मौलिक रचनाओं का सृजन किया है। आपने भारत के सभी प्रमुख नगरों के साथ साथ अमेरिका, इंग्लैंड, फ्रांस, स्पेन और सिंगापुर में भी अपनी कला की सफल प्रस्तुतियां की है। शिल्पायन द म्यूजिक हब के संस्थापक के रूप में आपने 5000 से अधिक छोटे बड़े शिष्यों को प्रशिक्षित किया है। यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ मैसेच्यूसेट्स, स्मिथ कॉलेज, एमोरी यूनिवर्सिटी एवं येल NUS जैसे प्रतिष्ठित विदेशी संस्थानों में विजिटिंग प्रोफेसर के रूप में आपने निरंतर सेवा प्रदान की है। आकाशवाणी के A ग्रेड के आप आर्टिस्ट हैं। आपको उत्तर प्रदेश संगीत नाटक एकेडमी पुरस्कार, भारत सरकार के सांस्कृतिक मंत्रालय द्वारा सीनियर फेलोशिप एवं सूरमणि उपाधि सहित अनेक सम्मानों से आप विभूषित हैं। श्री देवाशीष डे को तबले पर संगत दे रहे हैं श्री उमेश भाई बुढ़िया। ये राम कथा के आयोजन में एक अनन्य युवा सैनिक है। और हारमोनियम पर है हितेश गिरी गोसाई। पूज्य बापू की राम कथा का एक अंग जो यहाँ पर संगत प्रस्तुत करेंगे श्री देवाशीष डे। इनका स्वागत आप कर लीजिए। आप अपनी प्रस्तुति 10 मिनट की समय मर्यादा में प्रस्तुत कीजिए।
ध्यान गुरु मंत्रमूला गुरु गुरु कृपा कृपा पूज्य बापूजी के चरणों में मेरा प्रणाम। कल तुलसी जयंती है, उसकी बधाई आप सभी को। यहाँ उपस्थित इतने बड़े बड़े संत यहाँ उपस्थित हुए हैं विश्व भर से, उनके चरणों में भी मेरा प्रणाम और सभी भक्तजनों के। जब मुझे श्री किशनलाल जालान जी, भगीरथ जालान जी दोनों ने मुझे यहाँ आने के लिए एक प्रस्ताव दिया, तो मैं अपने इस वाद्य के साथ मैं कुछ गा रहा था। उसी समय ये फ़ोन आया और मैं इतनी खुशी से भर गया, अपने अंदर मैं इस आनंद को महसूस कर रहा था कि कुछ स्वर लहरियाँ चलने लगी और एक जैसे लगा कि कुछ एक नए स्वर लहरी का सृजन हो रहा है, अपने आप हो रहा है, मेरे मुख से निकल रहा है। मैं समझ गया कि कहीं से मुझे एक प्रेरणा मिल रही है, तो मैंने उस नए राग को एक आकार प्रदान करने की कोशिश की और उस राग का नाम मैंने आपके ही चरणों को समर्पित करते हुए मुरारी कल्याण, मुरारी कल्याण ये राग का नाम। और आज मैं पहली बार आप ही के चरणों में अर्पित कर रहा हूँ। जब जब अर्पित करूँगा आपके स्मरण आशीर्वाद के साथ ही मैं इसे प्रस्तुत करूँगा। ने सा गा मा पा गा मा पा धा मा पा गा मा गा ने सा मा मा गा मा गा ने सा मा गा सा गा मा पा ने सा गा ने सा ने दा पा गा मा पा सा ने दा पा दा मा पा गा मा गा पा मा धा मा पा गा मा गा ने सा मा गा सा। विनय पत्रिका का पद है, जाओ कहाँ जाओ कहाँ तजे चरण तुम्हारा चरण तुम्हारे। जाओ कहाँ तजे चरण तुम्हारे, चरण तुम्हारे। जाओ कहाँ तजे चरण तुम्हारे, चरण तुम्हारे। जाओ कहाँ तजे चरण तुम्हारे, चरण तुम्हारे। काको नाम पतित पावन जगह, काको नाम, काको नाम पतित पावन जगह, पतित पावन जगह। काको नाम पतित पावन जगह। कहत देन पिरारे, कहत देन पिरारे। जाओ कहाँ तजे चरण तुम्हारे, चरण तुम्हारे। कौन देव बराय बिरदहित, कौन देव, कौन देव बराय बिरदहित, कौन देव बराय बिरदहित। हठे हठे धारे, कौन देव बराय बिरदहित। हठे हठे अधम उधारे। खग मृग व्याध पाषाण विटप जड़, खग मृग व्याध पाषाण विटप जड़। जवन कवन सुरतारे, जवन कवन सुरतारे। चरण तुम्हारे, शरण तुम्हारे, शरण तुम्हारे, चरण तुम्हारे। देव तनुज मुनि नाग मनुज सब, देव तनुज मुनि नाग मनुज सब। माया माया देवतनुज मुनि नाग मनुज सब माया विवश विचारे, माया विवश विचारे। तिनके हाथ दास तुलसी प्रभु, तिनके हाथ दास तुलसी प्रभु, दास तुलसी 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 दास तुलसी तुलसीदास तुलसीदास तुलसीदास। जिनके हाथ दास तुलसी प्रभु, कहा अपनों को हारे, कहा अपन को हारे। जाऊं कहाँ तेरे चरण तुम्हारे, शरण तुम्हारे। जाऊं कहाँ तेरे चरण राम नाम राम नाम राम नाम राम नाम राम 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 नाम राम नाम राम नाम राम नाम राम नाम राम नाम। भजिए श्री राम नाम राम नाम राम नाम राम नाम राम नाम। राम नाम कमल फूल संतन मन भ्रमद भूल। राम नाम कमल फूल संतन मन भ्रमद भूल। पीवत रस झूम झूम, पीवत रस झूम झूम अमृत समान। राम नाम राम नाम राम नाम राम नाम। भजिए श्री राम नाम राम नाम राम नाम वेद मूल जपत मिटत त्रिविध शूल। राम नाम वेद मूल जपत मिटत त्रिविध शूल। असरण को शरण राम, शरण को शरण राम पावे सुख धाम, पावे सुख धाम। राम नाम 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 राम भजे ये श्री राम नाम राम नाम राम नाम राम नाम निरंकार तुलसीदास नमस्कार राम नाम निरंकार तुलसीदास नमस्कार दीजिए मोहे भक्ति सार 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 मोहे भक्ति सार दीजिए मोहे भक्ति सार छिन छिन विश्राम छिन छिन विश्राम राम नाम 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 राम राम नाम राम राम नाम राम राम नाम राम नाम राम नाम श्री
संगीत प्रस्तुति में देवाशीष जी ने अपनी सोच के मुताबिक एक नया राग सुनाया। मुरारी हमेशा कल्याणकारी ही होता है, तो मुरारी कल्याण आपने सुनाया और सब शास्त्रों का सार राम नाम है, जो आपने भैरवी में सबको सुनाया और सबके पास गवाया। आपके प्रति मैं आभार व्यक्त करता हूं और दोनों ने बहुत अच्छी संगत की है, इनकी सराहना भी मैं करता हूं। तुलसी जन्मदिन की आज ये पूर्व शाम है। कल पवित्र और प्रसंगों से भरा दिन है, कल सुबह कथा में भी हम सब मिलेंगे और शाम 5:30 बजे विविध अवार्ड अर्पण समारोह जो है उसमें भी हम उपस्थित रहेंगे। और ये समापन में, अवार्ड समारोह के समापन में पूज्य बापू भी अपनी प्रसन्नता व्यक्त करेंगे। सबको मैं निमंत्रित करता हूं कल के लिए। और आज की ये संगोष्ठी जो 3 दिन से एकेडमिक टॉक यहाँ पर चल रही थी, आज तीसरी संगोष्ठी थी। इसके साथ ये एकेडमिक टॉक की संगोष्ठियाँ यहाँ पर संपन्न होती है। कल अवार्ड अर्पण समारोह और फिर बाद में 3 दिन भारत से पधारे हुए सभी कथाकार और रामायण के विद्वान अपने अपने वक्तव्य देंगे। तो आज यहाँ पर यह संगोष्ठी संपन्न होती है। शुभ रात्रि, जय सिया राम।
महत्वपूर्ण सूचना, कृपया मुरारी बापू से संबंधित कोई भी